Well, good morning, everyone. We're starting today. This is the 12th of April, Saturday, the 12th of April. We're going to be having the first discussion online in English on this subject: which security structure best serves the interests of Greece, Greece's neighboring countries, allied countries, NATO? Oh, yeah, that's the question. All right, the answer: NATO, the UN, the EU, BRICS, something else. Well, that's the choice. There are three of us here today, so far. Nikos and I think, are probably well known, at least to ourselves. Bill, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Well, there's so much and so little. I'm a former British diplomat via English working in big American multinationals, public relations, and then a university in Britain. I came to Greece on a Greek government scholarship. I've been here for the last 30 years, and I've written a host of books. I'm essentially a
Yeah.
historian.
You very recently gave an interview on Russian television. Or what
Yes,
was
I've
it?
appeared several times on Russia Today, about 50, 60 times actually in the last
Yes,
few
well,
years.
but very recently also
Yes, I did on the tariff affair, as we
on
can
the tariffs.
call
That's
it.
right.
Yes.
Yes.
Look, I'm essentially an author and a historian and a researcher. I rape archives on Anglo-Greek relations. It's my latest book, in fact, is on Anglo-Greek relations. It's in two languages.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on and on. I like
Right.
spearfishing. I'm an
Okay.
ex-warsman, but that's about it, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Nico, have we are going to be are we going to be able to watch the public relations video with Anastasia Goliakova?
Okay, I begin it. I will uh, put it on
This
screen.
is this is public relations video on BRICS, uh, which is
Okay,
not which is one of the things we're talking about.
can I begin sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
No more waiting. Russia goes all in on BRICS. For decades, Russia played a delicate balancing act, engaging with the West while slowly expanding its role in BRICS. Not anymore. That strategy is over. Russia has made its choice. It's not hedging its bets. It's not looking for a way back into the Western-led global economy. It's going all in on BRICS. And this changes everything. Because this isn't just about Russia. This is about the future of global power. For years, the US and its allies believed they could pressure Russia into economic isolation. Sanctions would break its economy. The dollar would remain king. The West would always hold the upper hand. But Putin just made it clear. That world no longer exists. Russia is done waiting for the West to change its stance. It doesn't need to. Instead, it's accelerating its integration into a new financial system, a new trade network, and a new era of global cooperation. One where BRICS takes center stage. So, what does this mean? Is this a bold step toward economic independence or a risky bet that could backfire? Let's go through this step by step. For years, the US and Europe have used economic sanctions as a weapon. Their goal: to crush Russia's economy. The logic was simple: cut Russia off from trade, block its access to Western markets, force it into economic submission. That strategy has been in place since at least 2014, but instead of breaking Russia, it did something else. It forced a transformation. And now Putin has said it outright: sanctions aren't going anywhere. Even if the US or Europe pretends to ease some restrictions, others will just take their place. It's happened before. Back in the 1970s, the US passed the Jackson-Vanik Amendment to restrict trade with the Soviet Union. The USSR collapsed, but the amendment, it stayed. It wasn't reappealed until 2013, and even then, the US immediately replaced it with new sanctions. The pattern is clear. Western economic restrictions on Russia are never meant to end, but here is where it gets even more interesting. Some days ago, I attended a fascinating panel on Iran at the Valdai Club, one of Russia's most prestigious think tanks. Naturally, the topic of sanctions came up, and one analyst pointed out something most people don't realize. US sanctions aren't just policy decisions. They are political landmines. A president can't just erase them with the next executive order. Lifting them requires a vote in Congress. And in today's Washington, that's nearly impossible. Just look at the latest Russia-US peace talks in Saudi Arabia over Ukraine. Reports say Russia proposed a trade, readmit a few of its banks into SWIFT in exchange for a Black Sea grain deal. And the US, they agreed. But here is the catch. That doesn't mean it will happen. Because even though the US holds the most influence on SWIFT's board, it still has to deal with Europe. And Europe, it's unpredictable, emotional, even self-destructive when it comes to Russia. So even if some grand diplomatic breakthrough happened, even if relations somehow improved, these sanctions, they wouldn't just disappear. And Putin knows it. That's why Russia isn't waiting for a political miracle. It's moving forward on its own terms. It's no longer hoping for a return to business as usual. It's building a new economic order, one that no longer depends on the West. This shift isn't just about avoiding sanctions. It's about something bigger, economic sovereignty. Russia is now prioritizing its own industries, manufacturing, energy, defense, and technology over globalist policies. For decades, Moscow followed the hybrid economic model, blending state control with Western-style capitalism. That model is being replaced. The goal now? Self-efficiency. If foreign companies pull out of Russia, Russian businesses replace them. If Western investors leave, domestic investment increases. This isn't a temporary workaround. It's a permanent restructuring of the economy. And there is historical precedent for this. In the late 19th century, Russia went through rapid industrialization under statesman Sergei Victor. Instead of relying on imports, Russia built its own infrastructure. It developed railways, expanded domestic production, and reduced its dependence on Europe. Now history is repeating itself. Russia is once again redirecting its economy inward. But this time, it has BRICS. For years, BRICS was dismissed as a loose collection of developing economies. Now, it's emerging as a serious alternative to the Western-led system. Let's talk numbers. In 2024, the G7, made up of the US, Canada, Japan, and Western Europe, grew by just 1.9%. The Eurozone barely hit 0.9. BRICS, 4.9. That's not a coincidence. BRICS countries are accelerating their economic integration. And Russia is leading the charge. The most important shift, payment systems. For decades, the US dollar has dominated global trade. Countries had to use the dollar for the most international transactions, giving the US control over global finance. Russia is breaking away from that system. Moscow is working with BRICS partners to create new financial infrastructure, one that doesn't rely on the dollar or Western bank. We are seeing bilateral trade in local currencies, Russia and India trading in rupees instead of dollars, alternative payment networks, systems designed to bypass SWIFT and other Western-controlled financial tools, investment funds within BRICS, so countries can trade without needing to go through Western financial institutions. This isn't just about Russia. It's about the entire global South shifting away from Western financial dominance. And it's happening fast. This shift also means something else. Western businesses that left Russia, they are not getting special treatment if they want to return. After sanctions ramped up in 2022, hundreds of Western companies pulled out of Russia, expecting the economy to collapse. That didn't happen. Instead, Russian businesses took over. McDonald's left, Russia launched its own version. Western banks withdrew, Russian banks stepped in. European automakers exited, China and local Russian firms expanded production. And Putin made it clear, the train has left the station. Those who left will not be prioritized upon return. If Western companies want to come back, they will have to play by Russia's rules. And many Russian businesses aren't interested in going back to the old way of doing things. For them, the global economy has already changed. So what does this mean for the rest of the world? For the West, it's a major problem. They are losing access to Russian energy, Russian agriculture, Russian raw materials. And because BRICS is expanding, Western influence over global markets is shrinking. For emerging economies, though, this is an opportunity. Countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia are watching BRICS closely, and many are looking to join. Between full members and partners today, BRICS involves more than 20 nations on all continents. The global economy isn't centered around Washington and Brussels anymore. It's shifting toward Shanghai, New Delhi, Sao Paulo, and Moscow. And for Russia, that's exactly what it wants. Russia isn't waiting. It isn't hoping for the West to change course. It has already moved on. The global economy is shifting, and BRICS is leading that transformation. Faster growth, stronger trade networks, new financial systems. Russia isn't just adapting, it's thriving. And this isn't just about Russia. This is about the rise of a multipolar world. For decades, the West dictated the rules of global trade and finance. But now, that dominance is fading. Russia is proving that sanctions aren't an endgame. They are a catalyst for change. And the more countries follow its lead, the weaker the West's economic grip becomes. So what happens next? Will BRICS continue expanding? Will the dollar lose its dominance? Will the West find a way to counter this shift? The global balance of power is changing fast. And if you want to stay ahead of it, you need to pay attention. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Is the old world order is cracking? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because the next chapter in this economic shift is already unfolding. Thanks for watching.
Well, there it is then. This is a public relations exercise. I don't. I think that she does a pretty good job, but on the other hand, Bill, do you have any reaction you want to make?
I could give a lecture. How long do you want me to talk for?
No, just a few points, because we want to go on to the next thing. I mean, BRICS is, we're not plugging only BRICS. We're not plugging BRICS. I mean, we're having a discussion of a number of alternatives. You know, it would be nice if they really were alternatives, but we want them to be alternatives. You know, I want them. You know.
Well, I think in theory,
yes.
she's right in what she's saying. She's simply described what's happening using reliable statistics.
Yes.
Clearly, Russia, the sanctions have helped Russia, and they've boomeranged on the European Union. So the Americans are sniggering about that, of course, because the European Union is the world's largest trading bloc. And one of America's, Trump's objectives is to weaken Europe and to control Europe as much as it can as well. Russia doesn't care so much because, as we know, it's turning more to the east. I think we also need to see that, remember that we can't predict everything because human behavior itself is unpredictable, not only among the general population who are lobotomized in the West now by the media, via certain governments, but also the leaders themselves are becoming increasingly unpredictable. Europe is becoming like a bunch of lemmings. They've just approved yet another 21 billion in arms aid, half of which will be paid by Germany, which is getting too big for its boots. I could go on forever.
Right. Okay. Well, Nico, thanks very much.
One point. I must make one point. Very important point. Don't forget that when Catherine the Great organized a blockade against England during the War of Independence, this helped to stimulate the British English Industrial Revolution. So there you are. It's the same.
Well, there are lots of,
there you
the
go.
whole history of the 19th century and the role of Russia is in many of the things that happened in the United States, in Europe, and these are things that are not talked about, haven't been talked about, have been written out of history. But anyway, look, can we hear about what Georgescu has to say? Nico?
I will share now the video, the interview.
This is from Kalin Georgescu's interview with Rainer Fulmich, which was, taken before Fulmich was kidnapped, abducted, and so on. He has given a very recent interview. I mean, only yesterday or the day before, he gave another interview, even though he'd been out of sight for quite a while.
Tucker Carlson, I saw it. Yeah,
you saw it, right? Yeah,
well, the one with Tucker Carlson, you mean?
With Tucker Carlson, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's see the older one. Of course, we at the time that we made this decision to have this show, the Tucker Carlson interview wasn't available. Well, the more recent Tucker Carlson interview with Georgescu. So
I will share this part that you mentioned of 9 minutes from the 15 second. Okay.
This is an extract, of course, from where Georgescu is more or less explaining
just a moment
what he did.
Well, our interview partner is a former high-ranking member of the United Nations. His name is Kalin Georgescu, and it is best to talk to someone who knows from personal experience what he's talking about, rather than to talk to someone who just has ideas about what is going on inside the United Nations. Kalin, you used to work at the United Nations. What exactly did you do there?
Well, I serve this institution, thank you for your question, 17 years, almost 18, I can say. I start in Romania, in the United Nations Development Program, which, let's say, gives to me the chance to understand, first of all, the system. I was director for an important project, call it to coordinate the Romanian National Sustainable Development Strategy and Local Agenda 21, which I did for almost 40 counties in Romania. And after that, step by step, I arrive to different, let's say, events and in New York, and after that in Geneva, in many other countries, and I arrive also in the board for Europe in the United Nations Environmental Program. And the most important was that I was special rapporteur for waste.
Best and worst dinner for your waste.
Sorry, I don't know why there are advertisements. Sorry.
Dangerous products. Almost 2.5 years. And in all these things, I had the chance to have many meetings, many interviews, and particularly to understand how is running this system, but particularly in this position. Yeah, in fact, even myself, I was absolutely sure that United Nations is a fantastic institution which can help the people and the welfare, the human being, and to be a good life, to have a good life, and everything to be in harmony with the nature. Because this is my background, environmental protection. So based on my background, of course, I arrived to United Nations, and I arrived to be, let's say, call it a specialist in sustainable development. But later on, of course, I find how, in fact, the things are moving, because particularly when you are going in the field, you find reality. Reality is not from the office, not from the newspaper, not from the TV. It's from the ground. In the ground, I find that the most important part of the game, that the nature, the gods, the universe, give to us everything we want. Everything. So the universe can cover all our needs, but it's impossible to cover our greed. And the greed is not from the majority of the people. The greed is coming from a small part of the people.
Correct.
Today, okay, the globalists, the people they said. But it's not that, in my opinion.
I haven't seen this one.
Correct. That is fighting today between sovereignty and globalism. But the main important cause is the oligarch, the world oligarch system. This is the main important part.
Are they the one who
They
control?
want to have the control. And for this reason, UN, I understood your introduction. I don't believe that UN, which is this I find myself from inside, can be as the people they understood, or in general is this, let's say, rumor, whatever, that UN can be the new
One world government, whatever.
No, UN, it's exactly the platform, the bridge for the oligarchy system to control.
And the oligarchs are the ones who gather once a year in Davos, the members of the World Economic Forum?
Of course. And this is a point, because the UN agenda for 2030, as all the people they know, and with all the objectives great, that will be not problems with the food, with the scarcity of the natural resources, or we take care about the human being, we take care about the children. Everything is equal. This platform, this UN platform for 2030 with Davos agenda. So this is a main important point, because UN agenda for 2030 is equal Davos agenda. And here I want to underline one important point, that both of them are NGOs. So in fact, this Davos or World Economic Forum, whatever is nominated, it's an NGO. And in fact, my first question was when I arrived, first of all, in Davos, and I have seen so many control and powerful system. I mean, all the, let's say, Swiss police was engaged in this small, very well city, which is in fact is a tourist spot for winter time, for skiing, for that. So you
the point that is made, isn't that the more at the end of the extract?
In other words, the public.
What, Wayne? Sorry.
Isn't it the more or less the end of the extract? I mean,
it's
I think
two minutes.
The point that he
2 more minutes. You want to continue?
2 more minutes, is it?
Yes.
All right.
I continue.
All right.
Okay.
Security agency, the official police was used to protect a private enterprise, an NGO.
No, an NGO, not private, an NGO.
Well, that is a private enterprise, because they have member states, but the organization itself is a private organization, an NGO.
Yeah, it's an NGO, yeah, but in a sense that we cannot discuss even about the business, let's say, industry. Discuss about an NGO. And this NGO was protected totally by the public police. This is number one. Number two is that in the moment when you go in and you can see the meetings and the discussion, the conversation, I find that everything is, how I can say, it's extremely strong control. In a sense, it's just theater. Everything was done before. It's just someone who made the artists. They are doing the show.
So they just go through the motions. All the
Okay, that was the extract
Yeah.
that you pointed, Wayne.
All right. Well, the point he's making about them being NGOs, of course, is lacking any legitimation. That's the point that he's making. The arbitrary and unofficial and illegal. This is the point that he's making up now. Georgescu, of course, came first in the first round of the presidential elections, and when that happened, because it was such a shock, he was excluded. A story was given that the Russians were interfering, but in fact, what the reality is that the reason that he got so many votes, one of the reasons that he got so many votes was because the other parties, one of the other parties, I think it was the Social Democrats, decided, no, it was the Conservatives, because they thought that they could play a trick on the Social Democrats by luring Social Democratic votes to Georgescu, and that would make things better for the parties that they wanted, the conservative parties that they wanted to favor. So they were playing tricks of that kind, and when it backfired on them, they started pointing fingers at the Russians, which was just completely made up. But anyway, they excluded Georgescu on that basis, and they even cancelled the whole elections. I mean, the situation at the moment is that elections are programmed for May. They have allowed someone from the same party to be running. I mean, who was originally a rival of Georgescu, but when this kind of this level of corruption came to the surface, George Simeon lined up completely behind Georgescu, and he didn't want to be a candidate, or he said he didn't want to be a candidate, but finally he became a candidate and is more or less identified with the same proposals and the same politics. And of course, George Simeon has advantages from a viewpoint of being younger and also speaking English better. But anyway, we're yet to see. He is also leading the polls at the moment, so we'll see what happens. I mean, if he actually wins the election, something interesting might emerge. In the interview that Georgescu gave yesterday with Tucker Carlson, he said that he thought that Romania has a very important role to play on the world stage. And well, if Simeon wins the presidential election, there might be more grounds for beliefs of this kind or for interpretations of this kind. But anyway, we'll see in May. So we've gone through some of the possibilities that we were going to be looking at. Another thing to discuss would be, if I can find it.
Giulietto Chiesa I.
Yeah, all right.
Do you want me to put it on the screen? Or?
From the European Union. Okay, well,
This union.
I think there was a very good talk on the European Union made by Giulietto Chiesa before he died some years ago in Egina, where he made these points. He says, I want to record two fundamental points which were at the basis of the European idea, at the very beginning of the Ventotene Manifesto, and written by Spinelli. Two very simple words: peace and cooperation. Well, actually, these slogans are still being raised in relation to the European Union. Now by Georgescu, the ideal of peace, or the idea of peace also, but Georgescu also mentions freedom, which wasn't mentioned when Giulietto Chiesa was giving his talk. He didn't mention that, but Georgescu now does. And anyway, in the analysis that was made some years ago by Chiesa, he says that when the Cold War began, the idea of peace and cooperation was replaced by the idea of competition, and the idea of building a new European state without war was distorted more and more, leaving also a big chunk of Europe outside of the whole process. The Western world was divided into camps. This was closed in 1989 by the collapse of the Soviet Union. And, some people thought, well, now the enemy, this is the end of the enemy, so everything can be peaceful now. But of course, that isn't what happened. And the conclusion that Chiesa came to was that a planetary club with a totalitarian vocation is destroying the people of Europe, our lives, our democracy, our freedom. And he says our future is in deep danger. Gradually, without realizing it, we were delivered into the hands of an oligarchy without a home and without a soul, whose only bond is the delusion of omnipotence resulting from possession of money that it infinitely creates. Well, that's what Chiesa said 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. And it's being vindicated, of course. What seems to be going on now is a new version of good cop, bad cop games. But now the Americans have decided to be the good cops, and the Europeans don't seem to be all that. Well, they seem to be quite willing, as a matter of fact, even enthusiastic about being the bad cops themselves. Now, I think, Bill, you thought that you agreed entirely with the analysis that
Yes.
Chiesa made some years ago. Would you like to say anything else about it before we move on?
Well, yes, I think we should also add to that what's going on now in America isn't over. We've got the latter-day Bidenists and the deep state who are still fighting. Who are still fighting against.
That's right.
And you got the Europeans who seem still to be, most of them, more in the Biden, what I still call the ex-Biden camp, and that's a confusing thing. Now, in the US, you've got this still got this social civil war under.
That's right.
going on, which I think we also need to mention. That's what
I think we should, yes.
And we should remember that I love the way he used the word, the world oligarchic system. The other chap used that. I think it's got more extreme now in the last few years than it ever was before. And the way to understand these things, or try to understand human behavior, is to follow the money, because you have to look at who owns the money and who controls the money, and above all, the individual characteristics of these people. You have to look at atavism, emotion, the pseudo-morality which they spout, and the full Monty, and how they therefore control, let me be very arrogant and say, the mainly unthinking masses who actually don't want to think anymore, because they prefer just to get on with their own lives and be controlled. So it's a very big story. Trumpism hasn't yet fully arrived. You've got this nasty deep state in the States as well, which is important. And it's Europe is quite right. It began as a fairly idealistic organization, at least presentationally, and it's become the opposite now. It's become the complete opposite. I now call it the European disunion, the EU rather than the European Union in any case. We don't know what Europe will be in a few years, if it'll still exist, at least in its current form, because it became too big, too fast, and too greedy years ago, as we know. And of course, we also should have mentioned the connection between the EU and NATO. That's another whole ball game, and the question of I could go on forever, you know. I'll shut up now.
Well, I mean, as far as the EU and NATO is concerned, Giulietto appears to be more positively disposed towards NATO than he is towards the EU. I think probably this would be the case also with George Simeon. Now, I don't know to what extent the NATO can become the good cops also, rather than the bad cops as they've been so far. But anyway, it is the case that in Romanian politics, the people that we're watching in Iranian politics appear to be less badly disposed towards NATO than they are towards the European Union. And the European Union, of course, is behaving even worse than NATO at the moment. Or anyway, at least that's the impression that one can easily get if one looks at things on the surface. Well, the point is, what's preferable to all of this? I mean, one of the problems, of course, with BRICS is that it's even though it says that it's not trying to target anybody or against anybody, not wanting to be anti-West. In fact, it's rallying the countries that have been in the periphery, that have been many of them, of course, speak other languages other than English, and don't even know English. I mean, in the Spanish-speaking world, there's not much interest in people not as much interest as one might have, as English speaking people would perhaps want. There isn't so much interest in people communicating or using English as a lingua franca.
I call it hegemonolingualism. Hegemonolingualism, my word, my copyright.
Hegemonolingualism. Well, of course, this is very convenient for people who are English native speakers, or even who have learned English at school and learned it well. But this isn't really, even though BRICS is not at the moment moving very much against this, it's bringing together countries that are not very Anglo-oriented or not very English-oriented. So, okay, well, from a Russian and Chinese starting point, there's nothing strange about this. but it makes it a little bit difficult, I think, for people who've been used to being part of the so-called West to be taking on board the BRICS idea, even though the West appears to be so terrible at the moment that you don't want to have anything to do with it. That doesn't mean that it's very easy to line up with something which is completely foreign, as it seems, as sometimes BRICS appears to be, or to have that tendency to be. Of course, Nico and I have been working on alternative institutional proposals. I don't know whether then now's the time to go into them. I mean, we've got them down on paper for people who would like to study them. I don't. Would you like to say anything about it, Nico? I mean, you have spoken about this in Greek and on a number of occasions in public.
Yes.
But do you want to say anything about this and the possible relevance to security options?
I prefer listening this period than you and other people. And yes, I guess the video of Goliakova was before the tariffs. And
Yes.
now we have also those tariffs that added more geopolitical turmoil. And there's a question what Greece should do, what the European Union should do, what the reaction could be if we have to strengthen the trade with China or not, or if we have to impose to China products also tariffs by the European Union and stuff. But these are this is not.
Well, we're getting close to the hour now,
yes,
so maybe we can start winding
yes.
up. I mean,
yes, we can continue this discussion, and
yes.
maybe also in Greek, and maybe why not in Aegina or somewhere else.
Yeah, well, hopefully we will be able to continue it in some
Yeah.
kind of diazosis, as we say in
Yes.
Greek,
And
in real life. We'll see anyway. We'll make an attempt to do this. Bill, would you like to give us some final words?
Some final words.
Yes, some final words.
Some final words.
Okay, well, thank you for participating, and we'll meet again.
yeah.
Don't know where, don't know when. Some sunny day.
It's all, but buy gold.
What? Buy gold.
Buy gold, yeah.
Is that what you're doing at the moment?
If I had the money, I would. I'd buy
Yeah.
a Kruger.
Well, if I had the money, I'd probably hang on to my money, I think, and hope.
One has to balance the risks these days. Spread the risk.
All right. Well, Nico, you're the host. Would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
Okay, bye for now. See you next time to continue this discussion and other.
You've got some work ahead of you now, cutting out all of the unnecessary. There's a lot of it, I think, a lot of the unnecessary footage.